Hello and welcome to episode 142 of Magic Rays of Light, a podcast exploring the world of Apple TV and so much more. I'm your host, Devon Dundee. I'm joined by my co-host, Sigmund Judge. Sigmund, how's it going?
It's going a little bit bunged up. You're sounding nice and fresh and dandy, so that's good.
Yeah, I have seasonal allergies, but they're on the off season, so I'm actually feeling pretty good right now, which is opposite of a lot of people, but hope everyone who's not feeling great, including you, get to feeling better soon. But I am excited to talk with you. We got lots of fun stuff coming up this week.
Yeah, so I spent a fair bit of time this week in bed, but it's been a good week in bed. One thing I've wanted to do for the last few years during Halloween season is watch the Mel Brooks, Gene Wilder classic, Young Frankenstein. I don't know if you know it. It's a parody of a horror shot famously in black and white. Originally, there was this kind of conflict between the studio and Mel Brooks, because the studio said, we want to shoot it in colour and then we'll convert it to black and white. And Mel Brooks kind of knew what was going on here and was like, well, once it's all shot, it's going to be shown in colour. I want it to be shot in black and white. It's a fantastic film, and there were clips of that particular film earlier this year in Apple's kind of big hello to Apple Vision Pro, using all of the different film clips. Great montage. I hope we see more of those in the future, because they kind of represent this legacy element of Apple that still exists today, and the nostalgia of Apple. So I wanted to check this out, but being in bed, I wanted to watch Young Frankenstein on the biggest screen I own, in all the comfort, whilst I'm lying down. I've got the screen up, Apple Vision Pro. Unfortunately, there doesn't seem to be a way to stream this film at all legally. And so, whilst I kind of ditched physical media for a while, there are certain titles that I have kept because they're simply not available on streaming. But I'd never gone all the way out as to rip a DVD or a Blu-ray and create a media server, right? This is something that I think back in the early days of like PlayStation 3, when it had DLNA, and you could serve big HD files over to it and get a semi-par mediocre performance out of it. That's the last time I really messed around with media servers. And of course, we hear all the time about certain apps, Plex, Infuse, and other media players that can play a variety of different films in different formats, with different options. And having set up my Mac Mini that was on the podcast desk and is now in the server rack, but who knows, that might get replaced because it's silver and it stands out. I got everything set up, ripped my disk to a format that these apps would play. And as I posted earlier this week on social media, I was able to watch Young Frankenstein on the big screen on Apple Vision Pro via the server. But I got to do it in an extra special way, in 3D.
Oh, wow. So there wasn't a 3D version of the film on the disc, obviously. And I'm imagining you didn't hand convert it. So what was the process there like?
It's very, very cool, right? So going back a couple of steps, of course, I set up Plex as my main server on the network on my Mac Mini. And I attached some storage to that Mac Mini, and that's just dormant, waiting for anyone to attach to it and play media around the house and outside of the house. I downloaded initially Infuse, because I've heard so many amazing things, and Infuse 8.0 just came out, and it is super, super impressive. Being able to play direct, big 4K HDR files for some other Blu-rays that I own, that I also ripped. And the performance was just out of this world, and that ties in with Plex if you want it to. And of course, that's available on iPhone, on Mac, Apple TV, Apple Vision Pro, and so it's everywhere. Very, very cool. But there are other media apps out there that will do the same thing. I came across one on Apple Vision Pro called Cine Ultra, And this is very much like the same kind of thing where you connect to a Plex media server and you can play everything back that way. But the reason it piqued my interest was because they have real-time AI 3D conversion.
Wow.
It's not bad, but I decided to kind of go the absurdist route based on the colour versus black and white and go full hog and convert it to 3D and see what that looked like. And I think we've talked about this before. Older films, especially in black and white or the early days of Technicolor, they look fantastic in 3D on Apple Vision Pro. This looks pretty good as well, especially for a SD DVD rip, and it actually works quite well, pops quite well, and I'd imagine if you've got media files, maybe they're just videos that you've shot with family. Whilst we don't have spatial video conversion right now, we do have this 3D conversion, which I think is very cool.
Yeah, that's tempting. Cine Ultra sounds like a very cool app. It's not one I've tried out yet on my Apple Vision Pro, but you just sparked an idea. I need to check out some home videos and see how they convert to 3D. That's really cool. So you've got these files now on storage attached to your Mac Mini, which is acting as your media server. So how does that work actually playing back? Is it transcoding it, or is it moving it over locally? How does that work?
It all really depends on the bandwidth, right? Around the house, or if you're watching outside of your network. So there are transcode settings that you can play with in Plex. On Apple TV, there's some really nice controls when you're playing back media from the Plex app that allows you to choose exactly what you want in real time. Obviously, it's better if you don't need to transcode. And of course, with more modern devices like Apple TV, iPhone, iPad, there isn't any need to. The only real limitation, as I said, is bandwidth. Looking to play back outside of the network, there's a little trick that I'm using. We've talked about it before. It's called Tailscale. And the reason I use Tailscale is it's free, and it's this little program that just rests on the Mac or on your phone or even on Apple TV, believe it or not. And it acts as like an entry point to your other devices that are also signed up on the service to be able to log into your network via. And so I've been messing around with Plex. I don't have the best internet connection in terms of upload, but download is great. Upload, I get about 100 megabytes per second, which isn't that great today with the symmetrical up and down that fiber is introducing. It's enough to be able to stream in full quality one of these 4K HDR rips that I've had, and I tested that with a friend on their Apple TV at their place, and it worked perfectly, better than the Plex settings. Now, I have been installing Tailscale for a number of reasons. That's one of them, but the other one is we've been talking about streaming subscriptions and how they seem to be getting more difficult to maintain, right? In terms of the price goes up, then you have the password sharing issue, tiers change, and you have to pay a little bit more for maybe 4K and Dolby Atmos, or offline downloads, that kind of thing. And I do think that now knowing about these media servers and the software and actually looking into it, I think the streaming services may be pinching their nose to spite their face a little. The thing that I'm doing for Tailscale, because this is the thing, obviously if we want movies and TV shows to continue to be made, we want to subscribe, right? Because without our dollars and our pounds, these streaming services, and more importantly, the creators of these shows can't get financed. So there is that double-edged sword. But the thing that I'm using Tailscale for legitimate reasons is my mum shares Disney Plus with me. She lives by herself. She's never going to buy her own individual Disney Plus subscription. And the one other person that I share my passwords with for streaming has a very young family, and is struggling, right? But still wants to be entertained. And I feel that my one subscription still justifies it because we're not on it 24 hours a day. We have our lives to lead. So I got everyone to install Tailscale on their Apple TVs. And all they've got to do once it's set up, which takes a couple of minutes, is click on the VPN setting, choose Tailscale from the control center, and they're connected to my network. And then they're able to appear as though they're watching their Netflix, their Max, their Disney Plus, whatever it might be, from my home.
Yeah, that's a really interesting application of Tailscale. It's really cool how you can use it as an exit node and send not only your own devices, but other people's devices in that direction if you need to. It's also great for online safety. If you're wanting to prevent anyone from getting access to your data, you can run it all through your own network, even when you're out and about, which is very cool. So for more about Tailscale, if you're interested in learning more about it, because there's so many things you can do with it, we've just mentioned a couple of them here. John has a story for Club Mac Stories Plus members that's coming very soon with some awesome ideas for how you can apply Tailscale. And if you're not yet a Club Mac Stories member, now is a great time to jump in. Right now, you can go to the site and learn about getting discounts on a membership if you've not joined before, or if you've kind of fallen off and wanted to get back into it, or if you're not a Club Plus member and you're thinking about upgrading, you can get great discounts on that right now. So we'll leave a link to that in the show notes where you can learn more.
Yeah, very, very cool. Club Mac Stories. Of course, we had to plug it, but John was actually the first to introduce me to Tailscale just before it was introduced on tvOS and Apple TV. Really, really helpful because you can use the Apple TV as an exit node as well. You don't need to have an expensive Mac Mini or anything like that. So, yeah, John, the daddy of Mac Stories. Oh, cool. Mac Stories Daddy. We'll be able to check out his article this week.
Well, I'm sure we'll have more to talk about in terms of your media server as it continues to develop. So that's a cool project we'll be keeping an eye on. But for now, let's talk about Apple TV and especially an Apple original that we're looking forward to this week. We were hoping to highlight Before, starring Billy Crystal, which debuts this Friday on Apple TV Plus. Unfortunately, due to embargo times, we're not able to this week. We'll highlight it next week, but we did want to make sure to shout it out because it is this week's big release. But between now and then, Sigmund, there's a lot of consternation about some hardware that's supposed to be coming very soon, right around Halloween time, is, you know, what everyone's been expecting based on last year Apple releasing new Macs. The question is how they're going to release them and what exactly those Macs are going to look like. So we thought now would be a good time to have a little prediction game. Mm-hmm. We don't know for sure exactly what we're predicting, if it's an event or press release or what, but we know new Macs are coming within the next couple of weeks. So we're going to go ahead and try to predict them before they come. And once they do, we'll see who did the best job. Now, of course, all of this is really up in the air right now because what we were expecting was a Mac and iPad event, but Apple just released the iPad mini this week. They just tweeted it out and put it out into the world. It's the iPad mini with the A17 Pro chip. Surprising in some ways, not surprising in others. Federico has a full review of it on Mac Stories that is well worth checking out. But we thought that was going to be a part of some kind of event. Now it's not. So that just further adds to the confusion of what's going on here. But in the midst of all the confusion, we've got to try to make some sense of it and try to put our stake in the ground of what we think is going to happen. So for this game, we're going to have 3 regular picks, 1 point each. Of course, we always have to have our out there pick. That one's worth double, 2 points. So a total of 5 points available in this game. We're going to keep it nice and simple. Sigmund, you kick us off. What's your first prediction for the rollout of the M4 Max that we're expecting?
You're not going to like this one. It's going to be a bit of a boo here. But I have a theory on why. There simply isn't going to be an event that we sit down and watch.
Oh.
Now, by the time this podcast is out, we'll probably know either way. And I could be looking really stupid. But here's my theory. There was a lot of pressure on Tim Cook last year at this event to really Halloween it up beyond the, orange watch bands and all of the dark clothing. I really wanted to see him kind of, come as a vampire, maybe come under a different pseudonym. That did not happen, Devon, and I've got a funny feeling that there was inside pressure for that to happen if there was an event in October. And so I'm putting the blame directly on Tim Cook here. He simply is not into dress up.
I think that's totally fair. I mean, Halloween's not for everybody. You got to have kind of the right personality to be willing to, especially in front of millions of people like that, put on a costume and be silly. You know, Craig Federighi, he has no problem with it, but, you know, Tim's not going to do that. So, yeah, if that really is the deciding factor, I think you're probably right. I think just for the sake of fun, I hope that we have an event. I like the idea of having a pre-Halloween Apple event every year. If they want to keep up this pace, I think it'd be cool, but I completely understand, especially in light of the iPad mini. I think that's the thing that really just threw everything off. It's like, okay, if there's no iPads, this is just going to be Macs. Is this an event or is this just a press release? But there is one element that's making me think that this could be an event, and that's my first prediction. And that is that Apple announces a new Mac mini with an M4 chip and a smaller form factor than the current Mac mini. So we're expecting a pretty big redesign here with the Mac mini. We've talked for a while, ever since the Apple Silicon transition, maybe even before that, but definitely since the M1 came out, the Mac mini's just been too big for what it does. You know, there's a lot of empty space in there that's just not necessary. And we've been hoping for something more like the Apple TV box with an M series chip in it that serves as a Mac, right? I mean, I don't know if they're going to go quite that far. The Apple TV is pretty tiny, but I think we're going to be moving in that direction. And I feel like with a Mac like the Mac Mini, that maybe it's not the world's best seller, but it's very beloved and it fits in a lot of people's workflows. And I think people are really invested in the design of it in a way that maybe they aren't in other devices. I feel like Apple really wants to tout that redesign and make it as big of a deal as possible. So that's what makes me think if there is an event, that's going to be the center of it. And I just don't see them completely redesigning the Mac Mini for the first time in so long and not doing it via a video, you know, just doing it in a press release. I don't feel like it would translate as well.
I think we'll get a video for sure. I just don't think we'll get an event.
Oh.
But we'll have to wait and see, but I like it. So, a new Mac Mini with an M4 chip, right, in a smaller form factor than the current Mac Mini. That's your pick. It's a good one. I'm going to go 1/3. I don't think the Mac Mini is going to be the only Mac that's announced because, of course, if anything's like last year, then we'll have MacBook Pros and, you know, all sorts. Will we have a studio this year? That will be interesting to see. Mm-hmm. One thing, though, I feel now, and as much as my Mac Mini has been great to me, my M2 with the standard 256 gigabytes of storage and 8 gigabytes of RAM, there was a big shift in the marketing last time with the Mac Mini M2. And it was like the Mac Mini M2 or the Mac Mini M2 Pro. For that reason, I think that the next Macs that are going to be announced over the coming weeks are going to come with 16 gigabytes of RAM as standard. I just think we've got to that point now where you look at the RAM and the immense power that's on our phones and iPads. Just doesn't make sense now not to have at least 16 gigabytes to start off with the Mac to really show off what both the CPU and the GPU can do.
I think this is a great pick. This is a complaint we've had for a couple years. Pretty common about the Mac is that the 8 gigabytes of RAM is too low. That's a lot of people, when you're configuring your Mac, that's the first thing they recommend upgrading is your RAM and potentially storage as well, but RAM especially because you can't upgrade that later, right? And the M series chips do try to do some virtual random access memory and swapping and try to fill in the gaps there, but I mean, nothing beats just having dedicated space there. So I think this would be a really popular move. I think now seems like the right time to do it as we're going into the M4 era and really just kind of, I mean, it feels like we're resetting the baseline of what a Mac is, right? Because it seems like all the Macs are going to be going M4 before too long. So I think that would make this a really popular update and earn Apple a ton of goodwill going into the holiday season, which, you know, always helps.
Sure does. What is your second pick?
So my second pick, you mentioned we're expecting more than one Mac The one that I'm thinking is going to come is the iMac. And I always like to do a color pick because I'm very interested in what Apple does with colors. The big missing color on the iMac, it comes in so many, and I appreciate it for that, but I've always wanted to see a space gray M-Series iMac. And we haven't seen one. It's available in silver, but not space gray. So fingers crossed that this is the year that when they go to M4 with the iMacs, they're going to introduce the space gray model as well.
Just going back very quickly, when the iMac was reintroduced, right, with the M1, I loved the design of it. I just didn't like the colours because I'm boring. But I would love a space grey iMac. I think that might push a lot of people over the edge as well, because it's very difficult to kind of pick a colour that is so seasonal as well and of the moment. Beyond the old iMacs with all the colours and the CRT screens from the early 2000s, I don't think they just don't work for me, being very monochrome. So I like to see that, but also from a colour point of view, wouldn't it be really strange? And again, I'm mentioning the studio because there doesn't seem to be any rumours about the studio. Wouldn't it be strange for the one Mac not to be in space grey?
Yeah, that is interesting. They don't offer any color options on the Studio or the Mini now. Those are both just in silver. There's always been this idea, or used to be anyway, that darker Macs were Pro Macs. The iMac Pro was the only dark one. And I feel like a lot of that's gone away now. You look at the MacBook Air, it's available in darker colors. You look at all the options on the MacBook Pro, and another color rumor that we're not going to pick here is that the space black is actually going to be coming down to the lower end MacBook Pro, not the Pro one, but just the baseline one, which would be very cool. So yeah, the colors are constantly shifting. I feel like those old Pro colors are coming down the line. So I think it'd be great if you could pick a Studio or a Mini in space gray or silver as well. Why not just give us all the colors, right? Or at least all the grays. I've talked about the physical shape of these Macs a little bit, but let's talk about what they can do, right? Because M4, we're expecting M4 Pro and even M4 Max. How can Apple show off the power of these new chips in a way that they haven't before? We know you can do unlimited tracks in Logic Pro. Okay, you can have as many instruments as you want. You can have 100,000 4K streams in Final Cut Pro, which is amazing. What I want to see is a promise that was made in WWDC come to fruition here and demonstrated, and that is the promise of spatial video editing in Final Cut Pro. I want to see the M4 Max used to edit a spatial video in Apple's demonstration. I think it'd be a great way to tie together the power of these Macs with what they're doing in spatial video with Apple Vision Pro, kind of cross-promote a little bit, and show a new application of these chips in a way that we haven't seen before.
I'm with you 100% here. It's kind of how I'm imagining if there is a video launch, which there will be, that will go down this route. And I'm in so much agreement that my third pick is very similar to your third pick, because it also covers spatial video editing. Where I differentiate is I see it being shown using Apple Vision Pro in conjunction with Blackmagic Design's DaVinci Resolve running on Mac. Last year, during the Scary Fast event, we saw, strangely I thought, Adobe Premiere on the screens. Now, Apple and Adobe don't have a partnership in any way, as far as I'm aware. And if we're talking about Apple Vision Pro and spatial video and the compute power that you're going to need to be able to edit something like that, I know Blackmagic and Apple are working on some software together. Blackmagic, of course, bringing out the Cine Ursa immersive line of cameras with a fixed lens. So I do think that this would be the perfect time to demonstrate some of that. Maybe on the audio side of things, we see Trent Reznor talking about the soundtrack for The Gorge. I do think, and I had to change my first pick in these predictions when I kind of decided, you know what, there's just not going to be an event. Mm-hmm. But if there was an event, I thought it would highlight a lot of the creators for Apple Originals seeing as we're on the cusp of the service's 5-year anniversary. And all of these tools, of course, make a lot of sense for film and music makers.
Yeah, Apple also loves to show off third-party software in these events, not just their own, but show off how other developers can take advantage of it as well. And I think DaVinci Resolve would be a great one to show off spatial video editing. So fingers crossed we both get these points. I think that would be great to see. All right, those are our regular picks. We've also got our out there picks worth 2 points each. Mine's pretty out there, Sigmund, because my pitch is that Apple's actually going to cannibalize the Apple TV a little bit, which would be interesting. My prediction is that they're going to pitch the Mac Mini as a home media center device. This is something a lot of people used to do back before the Apple TV, or even the early days of the Apple TV when it was actually more Mac-like before it really got focused on streaming and became the little black box that we know today. And I feel like that's gone away for the most part. You don't hear a lot about people using Mac Minis hooked up to their TVs anymore. Every once in a while, maybe a little bit, but it's just not been optimized for that. But there's been some changes in Mac OS with HDMI pass-through with the audio, and I think with the shrinking down of the Mac Mini, there could be something there. There's going to have to be some software changes for Mac OS, maybe bringing back Front Row, which is something that you've pitched before, making Front Row a thing again. But I don't know. I don't know for sure that they'll do this, but I feel like this little Mac Mini could unlock some possibilities in terms of media center, media server, hooking it up to your TV. I feel like there's some cool use cases there that Apple could highlight. It would be a big change in kind of their marketing for it, but that's why it's the out there pick.
It's an interesting pick, and I think it's evident that we definitely influence, our picks over the course of the time that we'll be doing the podcast together. Because I don't think this is something you would have picked a few years ago. This is, I feel like, very much a me pick. I didn't go for this purely because recently, actually, this is something that I shared with you. I'd been trying out an app called Remote Buddy on the Mac to pair my Siri remote with the TV app and see how that worked out. I got to tell you, as cool as it is and experimental as it is, the actual user experience is really bad. Really bad. So as much as I hope one day we'll get like a front row version of the TV app, I just don't see it coming anytime soon. And I don't think it's also something that Apple really want to talk about in terms of, hey, you can use this as a media server and rip all of your stuff, rather than, hey, go to the TV app and buy everything and subscribe. So as much as I really, really say this is something I would have picked a couple of years ago, and then you calmed me down and I've clearly become a bad influence to you, Devon. That is quite the out there pick. I don't see it happening. My out there pick is something not as out there, but with a twist. Whilst planning the show, I said, one thing that we clearly can't use as a pick is new keyboards, new Magic Mice, new trackpads with USB-C, because it's a certainty at this point, given that the law in Europe means that Apple wouldn't be able to sell any of those accessories at the end of December. So a refresh is clearly coming. But with all of my different devices being able to connect to the Magic Mouse and to the keyboard, including my Apple TV, my iPad, Mac, Apple Vision Pro, I'm going to put it out there and say I think we're going to get these accessories in a way where it pairs like AirPods. So what device are you nearest to, right? If you're clearly away from your Mac and you've taken things with you. That could be done with Bluetooth 5.3. 6 would be great, but 6 isn't on anything right now, and I think it was only announced last month. But yeah, that's what I see. I see these new accessories, but having a quick pair and being able to switch to different devices in some way, whether that's AirPods or via a switch like we see on third-party keyboards. And I haven't stopped there, because I realise that this is a gimme otherwise. I think the keyboard, it's finally time. Battery and everything's got good now, right? We can pretty much run everything on a rechargeable battery these days, and that was always the reason why there was no backlit keyboard on the standalone Magic keyboards. And I think this is the time where we finally see that happen. So a backlit keyboard from Apple after all these years.
I love it. Yes, both of these sound like awesome picks. I would love to see, Apple just take the H1 chip off the AirPods, throw it in the keyboard, do that magic switching that way. They love to kind of reuse those technologies when it makes sense, and I think that would be a great use of it. And backlighting, yeah, that would be great. You've got USB-C coming inevitably, so you could even fast charge it if you need to charge it in that way. But yeah, I think this would be amazing. The only other request I would have on top of that, and I wouldn't tell you to put this in your pick because then it would just be so far out there that there's no finding it. But if they could find a way to incorporate Touch ID into the Magic Trackpad, I think that would be really cool.
Ooh, for what reason?
But just for people who don't want to use the Magic Keyboard or are using a Magic Keyboard that doesn't have Touch ID, I think to have it in either one would be great. And also, if there's any way to integrate Touch ID into other platforms as well, especially like Apple Vision Pro and the iPad, that would be cool. So yeah, I think I'm really into Touch ID on the Mac keyboard. I just want to see it continue to expand. But, I didn't think I was going to come out as a Touch ID stand today, but here we are.
A touching final remark on our predictions for Mac releases in October. But we had some other hardware news, non-Apple specific, that we just kind of missed on last week's episode. It was packed, didn't really have a lot of time. I'm not a big Sonos user, but I imagine lots of people listening are, because I'm very much HomePod or wired speakers. But there's some good stuff happening over at Sonos.
They are putting out some new hardware after, of course, their headphones earlier this year. But now Sonos is coming out with the latest soundbar and subwoofer in their line. The Arc Ultra soundbar, which is priced at $999, introduces a new technology called Sound Motion that supercharges bass output while reducing the size of the transducer, resulting in bigger sound from smaller products, and delivers what the company calls a 9.1.4 spatial audio experience, which we were talking about this off the show. That's a really big claim, right, Sigmund?
Yeah. Well, let's put a wait and see on that one.
Meanwhile, the $799 Sub 4, which I think is an expensive subwoofer, is the company's most advanced subwoofer to date, with dual custom woofers and increased processing power and memory. Both are available for pre-order now, with delivery starting on October 29th. So if you want to get spooky with your sound system in your living room, you can introduce the new Arc Ultra soundbar and Sub 4. They're going to cost you quite a bit, but based on what Sonos is saying, they're going to sound pretty great too.
It'll be interesting to see how these review once they come out. There's one particular person at The Verge that I think we'll be keeping an eye out on, Mr. Sonos himself, Chris Welch. So yeah, be very, very interesting to see this next step for the company, who of course, have been under a little bit of hot water with the rollout of their new app, but it seems things are evening out there.
Speaking of apps, we've got a couple app updates to talk about. The NBA app has been updated in anticipation of the upcoming season. The tentpole feature is multi-view, allowing users to watch up to 4 games at once, which would be great once the season really gets going. The app also includes Smart Rewind, offline downloading for finished games, various recap versions of games, so you can kind of pick the version that you want to watch, whether it's key plays or every score, things like that, and interactive sync stats to give viewers a live experience even when watching a pre-recorded game, which is very cool. Anytime I think about a feature like that, I always think of the episode of How I Met Your Mother when the entire crew can't watch the Super Bowl and tries to avoid spoilers for it all weekend long. And I think giving people the opportunity to avoid spoilers and watch the game as if it were live, I think that's very cool and a great addition to the NBA app. Feels like most weeks we have some kind of Disney news to talk about, Sigmund, good or bad. This one, It's interesting. I don't know if we can call it either one, but Disney has removed in-app purchases from the Disney Plus and Hulu apps on Apple platforms, directing customers to subscribe directly through the streaming services websites instead. So if you'll remember, we had a big discussion about streaming apps recently and the different features that they offered on Apple TV. In-app purchasing was one of them, and Disney got full marks for that, but now it seems like that decision has changed, and it makes sense. They're not wanting to pay the fee, and not wanting to charge customers more, especially with the price hikes that they have going on. So the best option, I would say, to save money and make sure that you're getting the best deal is to subscribe directly anyway, or, of course, get the bundles, which is usually where you can save money if you're willing to be locked in like that.
Devon, I'm going to put my tinfoil hat on for a moment here, because I find it interesting that this move was made a day or so before the FTC confirmed the click to cancel initiative, where basically subscriptions would have to be as easy to cancel as they are to sign up for. This is a law that's coming April, and there are penalties for those that don't go along with this. And my first thought was, well, how easy is it to subscribe to Disney Plus through the TV app or through Apple? Very, very easy. The law states that it's got to be as easy to cancel as it is to sign up. So, in a weird way, I think Disney have decided to make it a little bit more difficult to sign up, because people that are interested are going to go through those hoops to sign up on the website. But it's going to be just as difficult or as easy to cancel.
It's an interesting idea. It's kind of one of those things where if that's the case, it's the law kind of having an unintended effect, I think. But one issue you do run into, and I've run into this several times, is when you subscribe to a streaming service through in-app purchase, you can't control your billing at all on the web. If I go to my Netflix account on the web, I can't change my subscription in any way. All it says is you have to go through your Apple settings. So I wonder if that's going to cause any issues for this click to cancel law, or if they're going to have to implement some kind of better way to handle that.
I mean, my feeling, and it always has been, is that is the easiest way to be able to kind of dip in and out of subscriptions, because it's all listed in the TV app under account, and you can do that on your phone, on pretty much, you can do that from anywhere that the TV app exists, right?
Yeah, pretty much everywhere except the web. You do have to have an actual Apple device to get in there. So yeah, I wonder if that'll have any impact. But regardless, it's an interesting little note. If you're already subscribed to Disney Plus through in-app purchase, you're fine. You can stay locked in. But if you're going to be resubscribing or starting a new subscription, you're going to have to do it through the web now.
Now, we talked about home devices, right, with robotic arms. We've talked about, what we hope would be the future of Apple TV. This was not in my gimme list of things that I predicted for the future of Apple TV specifically. And I think really this is kind of going down that line. Apple recently have been granted a patent for a projector that can display augmented reality and virtual reality content on tables and walls, which the company says in their patent filing that could be used to mirror the display of a device like the Vision Pro to others in the room. The device could take the shape of a light bulb and even be powered by plugging it into a conventional light socket. Now, before we get too excited, there was also a patent from probably about 8 years ago now indicating rear channel HomePod surround sound was on its way. That hasn't yet to come, and I think this is way into the future, but really interesting concept.
Yeah, I'm just imagining, I can't even imagine how expensive these would be, but I'm imagining buying like 4 of them and putting them in my ceiling light fixture and just kind of flooding the room with Encounter Dinosaurs or whatever AR, VR stuff we're doing. Submerged. I mean, the room just fills with water as you're standing there. I mean, that would be pretty wild. But yeah, it's cool to get these little glimpses behind what Apple's thinking about through their patents.
Think of the automations you could run if you have an unexpected intruder.
Oh my, yeah, lots to think about there. But Yeah, pretty far off, as you said. Very, very cool to see that they're working on it, though. One thing I'd love to watch on my walls and ceiling in an immersive environment is trailers for upcoming Apple originals. You know, we get really excited when we get glimpses of upcoming shows and movies. We got 3 this week that we want to dive into. The first is for You Would Do It Too, which is coming next Wednesday. You did your fan edit of the Spanish trailer not too long ago. I have to say, Sigmund, you did a great job. I think it was pretty close to what we saw with the official trailer here.
Yeah, very much so. It surprised me. What also surprised me, though, was the trailer for Bread and Roses. We saw this documentary listed for a long, long time now in the coming soon part of the Apple TV Plus press website. So we knew it was coming. What was interesting to me is that, of course, this is the second film from Malala Yousafzai's production house. The first being The Last of the Sea Women, which is currently streaming on Apple TV Plus and made the rounds during the festival circuit that's just been, and I guess in some places ongoing. I think in Rome right now there's something happening there. This looks fantastic. Set in the wake of the Taliban's return to power, a group of Kabul women lead a revolutionary fight for their rights and their lives.
سنار طالبا گفتن که در خانه باشن و اگر اعتراض میکنه و صدای خود بلند میکنه تسکیر میشه و ما نباید خاموش باشیم مجبوریم مبارزه کنیم دیگه کدام راهی نداره حالا از جان خود گذشتیم سر ما فدای وطن و هموطنه.
This upcoming film is directed by Sarah Marni, produced by Jennifer Lawrence and Justine Sorochi. We got our first look. What did you think, Devon?
This trailer is gutting, I would say. I think this whole documentary is going to be a meaningful watch, but a tough one for sure. I mean, I'm just on the edge of my seat the entire time. A lot of it looks like phone footage or, very kind of low-res footage. It's these women who are secretly recording their protest efforts to try to get their rights back in a country where they're very much, being forced into the shadows and being told to stay at home, not able to go to school, not able to go to work. And I can't even imagine trying to fight that fight, especially in 2024. Having lived in a world where you've had those rights and to suddenly have them taken away, I can't even imagine. So, the trailer's really powerful. I have to imagine the documentary itself will be as well. Very scary, though, I will say, going into it. You read the synopsis and it's a very serious subject, but actually watching it on the ground happening, it's very, very scary, and also, of course, very inspiring to see these women fighting for what they know to be right. So, this trailer really hooked me. It stuck with me. It's what I've been thinking about since I first watched it. But definitely be ready for something heavy when you go into the trailer or when you watch the film when it does come out on Apple TV Plus on November 22nd.
The theme of empowerment and strong women continues in our trailer talk this week, because we got the first look of the second season of Bad Sisters this week, where we rejoin the Galvey sisters 2 years after the accidental death of Grace's abusive husband, where the sisters have moved on, but when past truths resurface, the ladies are thrust back into the spotlight. Suspicions are at an all-time high. Lies are told, secrets are revealed, and the sisters are forced to work out who they can trust.
We covered up a murder.
The world's better off without her. Even the Pope would say that.
They found a dead body in a suitcase.
What if the sisters were all in on it?
I know what you did.
We will get to the bottom of it.
We need to get the cops looking at the right person.
We are the right person.
Starring and created by Sharon Horgan, alongside Anne-Maria Duff, Ava Birth-Fissel, Sarah Green, and Eve Hewson. This gripped me, and I would say, I think even those that haven't yet seen the first season of Bad Sisters, this is just a gripping trailer for the whole story, really. and it's made me want to revisit this series. I think we talked about it at the time, it being quite a dark comedy thriller, and there were certain elements I found hard to watch. This, I think, is going to be more of the same, but a little more accessible, a little bit more about the repercussions of the events of the first season. But what did you think of the trailer itself?
I thought the trailer was really exciting. What I liked most about it, we didn't know going into season 2 what the story was going to be, how it was going to connect to season 1, because season 1 was based on a book. Season 2 is an original story. It's a continuation of the story. And I really didn't think it was going to be so connected to the events of season 1. We actually see Clace Bang in the trailer, not live, but in a photo. I mean, there's references to the events of season 1, and really this season's going to be directly connected to it. So that's exciting to me. I love that we get to see Grace in a happy place at the beginning of this trailer. Of course, they're going to be going through some stressful times throughout the season, but it's just nice to see her happy and smiling and, finding love again after what happened to her. I don't know about you, Sigmund. I always thought she'd end up with the neighbor, Roger. Maybe I was misinterpreting some of those scenes, but I just kind of assumed that season 2 would pick up and they'd be together, and that's not the case. But Roger does factor pretty prominently in this season. Villain might be too strong of a word, but he's definitely a catalyst for what's happening this season and how this truth keeps trying to rear its head. So it's going to be very interesting to see his role. I'm excited that he's involved. I loved him in the first season, and so happy that he's going to be there. But yeah, this looks great. It's just a continuation of what we've seen with season 1. But if you haven't watched season 1, I'd say definitely check it out, because I think it's going to be a good jumping in point as well. Super excited for Bad Sisters season 2. We don't have very long to wait for it, because it all starts November 13th when Bad Sisters returns.
And for those that are really excited for the second season of Bad Sisters, I've got some good news if you reside in London and you're free this weekend, specifically on Saturday at London's Regent Street Apple Store, where there will be a exclusive Today at Apple session where Apple will host creator and star Sharon Horgan, director Deirdre Walsh, and stars Anne-Marie Duff, Ava Burstfissel, Sarah Green and Eve Hewson, who will take us inside the making of season 2 and the return of the Garvey sisters, hosted by Redika Seth, editor at British Vogue. This is going to be from 6:30 till 7:30. I will be attending, and I may have a couple of extra spots. So if by the time you listen to this, you've clicked the link in the show notes to try and get tickets and there aren't any available and you still would like to go, then you can shoot me a message, sigmund@macstories.net. Meanwhile, something that's a little bit more open, but again to the UK, on November 2nd, Apple are hosting a number of free screenings for Steve McQueen's upcoming World War II epic, Blitz, in conjunction with We Are Parable. 5 screenings will take place in London, Manchester, Bristol, Glasgow and Birmingham, and you can sign up for tickets, again, linked in the show notes. We also have some good news for our South American listeners, as Apple TV Plus is officially headed to Brazil's CCXP with Severance and The Gorge, both set to make an appearance on December 7th at the biggest pop culture festival in the world. Now, I'm really excited about this because it just means that The Gorge is coming very, very soon. Can we have a guess and say January? Sounds like a good time for this?
I think so. Yeah, January sounds like the perfect time for Gorge to go out to the theaters and find out what's happening in that big hole in the ground. One last little tidbit of news for Severance fans. I got a memo this morning. All it said, Sigmund, was meeting tomorrow with a YouTube link. So unfortunately, with our recording schedule, we're not going to be able to cover it this week. We'll make sure to cover it next week. But we're going to be probably meeting some new Lumen workers ahead of season 2 this week, which is very exciting. In production news, this week we found out that in partnership with the MLB, Apple is producing a 3-part docuseries from Imagine Documentaries, executive producer Derek Jeter and director RJ Cutler, taking viewers behind the scenes of the 2024 World Series, where the New York Yankees will face off against the LA Dodgers. including interviews with players, coaches, fans, journalists, and family members. The series will take fans through the unforgettable milestones on each team's journey to capture the most storied trophy in American sports, a World Series championship. I know a lot of people, including friend of the show James Lees, are very excited about this matchup for the World Series. It's always a really interesting story. Baseball fans love to keep up with it. It seems like it's always lots of ups and downs. There's never like just a clear person who's coming in and going to take it. So I imagine this is going to be an awesome journey and a great subject for a docuseries coming from Imagine Documentaries, which is very cool.
And also from RJ Cutler, who brought us the Billie Eilish documentary and Dear also. So definitely the go-to person for documentaries when it comes to Apple originals. And looking forward to seeing what he does with a sports documentary. I'm not sure if he's ever tackled that before. So yeah, very, 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 very cool. In development now, Apple has extended its first look deal with Kevin Walsh, who produced Apple original films The Instigators and Napoleon, as well as upcoming Apple original film Echo Valley, starring Julianne Moore and Sydney Sweeney. Deadline reports that talks are currently ongoing for a potential Instigators sequel. And this just kind of blew my mind, to be quite honest with you. Both a Wolf sequel and an Instigators sequel. Both doing quite well with audiences, it would seem.
Yeah, and Family Plan too. People love their action films on Apple TV Plus, which is great to see. Hey, don't laugh about Family Plan 2. I'm excited for it, Sigmund.
Yeah, different strokes for different folks. And, we spread the positivity everywhere. As does a certain Ted Lasso. We got some further information of Season 4, I think, after breaking the Season 4 confirmation and then having it further confirmed last week. We have even more confirmation this week, and I think this is probably the last time we're going to talk about it for a little while. Channing Dungey, the chairman and CEO of Warner Brothers TV Group, had an interview with Variety where he's quoted as saying, "We had always been clear that there wasn't going to be more Ted Lasso if Jason Sudeikis and team weren't feeling excited about it. And I can tell you firsthand that he's in a place where he's feeling really excited and feels good about it." So, I think that puts everything to bed. It's not AFC Richmond, it's not a spin-off. This is Ted Lasso Season 4, which makes perfect sense from a marketing point of view as well. You've already got that accepted brand and multi-award winning as well. So, yeah, Ted Lasso Season 4, filming in just a couple of months across the US and the UK.
We don't know anything about Ted Lasso Season 4 casting right now, but we do have some casting news this week for Apple Originals. Judy Greer has joined the cast of The Last Thing He Told Me Season 2 in a recurring role where she will join series lead Jennifer Garner and Angourie Rice. Plot details are under wraps for the new season, but it's based on Laura Dave's sequel novel, which is set to be published next year. So if you want a preview of Season 2, you can pick up the novel and get ready for Season 2, which is going to be starring Judy Greer.
I wonder if that's going to be a read-along kind of thing. You read one chapter one week, you watch the episodes, and then you continue.
Hey, that would be a cool way to release it. I'd be into that, like a book club built into your TV show.
Absolutely. And maybe release the book by chapter digitally to tie in with it. I don't know.
Yeah, I like it. No spoilers.
Book lovers are probably hating that concept.
The cast of For All Mankind Season 5 is expanding. Sean Kaufman will play an older version of Kelly Baldwin's son, Alex, while Ruby Cruz portrays Miles Dale's daughter, Lily. And Inez Asserson joins as A.J. Jarrett, a U.S. Marine training for a space mission. Finally, for casting, upcoming Apple original film The Way of the Warrior Kid has added newcomers Arlen Ruff and Ellis Hobbs IV to its cast, which is led by previously announced stars Chris Pratt, Linda Cardellini, and Jude Hill. So, exciting cast for that film and adding a couple of newcomers as well.
Now, that's all to come. But one highlight from the last couple of weeks in the Apple TV app, and specifically on Apple TV Plus, is Shrinking. We highlighted it just last week, and we talked about how we hope that there's going to be many, many seasons to come, and, this just ends up being a massive hit for Apple. Well, Apple tend to agree, because just 2 episodes into Season 2, Season 3 has been confirmed.
Yeah, we love to see this. It's awesome to watch an entire season of a show knowing that there's more. That's one thing I love about Slow Horses. And so knowing that shrinking's got this bright future ahead of it that we always knew it had, but to know that Apple believes that as well and is going to sign the check for it, that's great to see. And I love these earlier renewals that Apple was really believing in the shows and continuing to invest in them, these multi-year stories. And I'm excited. I can't wait to see what happens in season 2 of Shrinking, but now we have season 3 to look forward to as well. Something else we always look forward to every week is finding out what's happening in Apple's for-your consideration department. There's always different awards shows going and different honors that are going out. This week, the nominees for the Critics' Choice Documentary Awards were announced, and there were several Apple originals on the list. The Last of the Sea Women, a documentary that we've sung high praises for, got 3 nominations, including Best Science and Nature Documentary, Best New Documentary Filmmaker for Sue Kim, and Best Cinematography. Meanwhile, Steve Martin, a documentary in 2 parts, was nominated for Best Biographical Documentary and Best Narration by Steve Martin. Girl State was nominated for Best Political Documentary, and The Dynasty New England Patriots was nominated for Best Sports Documentary. Winners will be announced at the CCA Documentary Awards ceremony on Sunday, November 10th at 7 p.m. Eastern. Congratulations to all the nominees.
Now for this week's Apple TV releases. Starting with Apple Arcade, we got some Halloween events because as much as we haven't really kind of fully embraced spooky season in terms of our movie and TV show picks, I think we're about to. And Apple Arcade is probably a good introduction to that season.
Yeah, who doesn't love to be scared while you're playing your favorite video game, right?
I mean, definitely make sure you've got Apple Care Plus, right? In case you throw your phone. Seen it happen.
Oh man, hopefully it's not quite that scary. Anyway, there's Halloween events going on in Rabbids Legends of the Multiverse, Jetpack Joyride Plus, Crayons Adventures, and Temple Run Plus, as well as the 50th anniversary event in Hello Kitty Island Adventure, and new levels in Castle Crumble, Temple Run Puzzle Adventure, and Simon's Cat Story Time. So lots of new stuff to check out on Apple Arcade, a service that I feel like there's just constantly something new to check out and new things to play there.
Absolutely. And, there's always new things to play in the TV app. And I wanted to start with the MLS Awards. Major League Soccer, of course, we're getting to playoffs time, and the end of the regular season is once again being celebrated with short bursts of highlights from the best strikers to the best defenders to the best goalkeepers and the best games from the league so far. These highlights will roll out progressively throughout the coming weeks in the TV app. And I'm very happy to see that they're a little longer this time. Last season, we got maybe 20-second clips, almost not worth it to have in separate videos. This time, 3.5 minutes for the first, which highlights Benteke. So there we go.
Very cool. In terms of Apple Originals, today we've got new episodes of Shrinking, Where's Wanda, and Midnight Family. Then on Friday, we have the premiere of Before, starring Billy Crystal, new episodes of La Maison and Disclaimer, and on MLS Season Pass, in case you haven't heard about it, Messi's first playoff match is happening on Friday. You can watch it at home on your TV, or if you're in New York City, go to Times Square and you can watch it on that gigantic screen that Apple somehow rented out for this game. Then on Monday, if you want something to listen to while you're playing Apple Arcade or doing chores or whatever else it is that you're doing, there's a new Apple Original podcast debuting. It's called Extra Sensory. It comes to us from Blanchard House, hosted by Will Sharp, and it follows the search for 2 English twins believed by some to be reincarnations of their late sisters in light of their father's prophecy and one American scientist's startling conclusion: what if death is only the beginning? Now, I've listened to the trailer for this one. This sounds very interesting, very supernatural, kind of, like a ghost story almost kind of thing. But the twist here, I think, is what they're trying to do is track down the 2 people that are actually the subject of the story, because it's recent enough that they actually could be tracked down. So we don't know for sure if they've been found. The trailer's just kind of hinting at it, of course, but we'll have to wait and see what happens with this show. Now, the good news is, if you're an Apple TV Plus subscriber, you don't have to wait week to week to find out what happens, because all 8 episodes will be available Monday. You can just go into the Apple Podcast app, verify that you're an Apple TV Plus subscriber, and you'll be able to listen to them all. If you're not a subscriber, which now might be a good time to go ahead and try it out, there's lots of good Apple Originals and this podcast as well. But if you're not, you can listen to the first 2 episodes on Monday, and then they'll roll out weekly over the next 6 weeks. So little perk for Apple TV Plus subscribers there in the podcast app, which is very cool.
Finally, some extras. Apple Fitness Plus, Treadmill with Scott featuring Apple Music radio host Jade Donovan, alongside a artist spotlight on the service of Kygo. We then have the cast of Shrinking giving some life advice in one video, and then Jessica Williams, Krista Miller, and Lukita Maxwell discussing therapy and more in another. And of course, with all of the excitement for the second season of Silo, Rebecca Ferguson breaks down fan theories for the second season and what's actually going on, which is interesting considering this is based on a book.
Yeah, but the fan theory videos are always fun because you get to see the cast members react to what the fans are thinking. Some of them are obviously ridiculous, and some of them might be getting a little bit close to the truth, and sometimes you can see on the actors' faces when it's like, oh, this person got really close. So yeah, I love these kinds of videos. And then for disclaimer, there's behind the scenes of each episode, little featurettes going into the thought behind each one, what it was like to perform in each one. These are very cool. Series I continue to enjoy, still rolling out on Apple TV Plus now.
Last week saw the finale for the second season of Pachinko, and we're about to delve right into it. So spoiler warning ahead. If you have yet to catch up, then please skip this chapter and we'll see you when you're ready to listen. But for now, this sweeping saga chronicles the hopes and dreams of Korean immigrant family across 4 generations as they leave their homeland in an indomitable quest to survive and thrive.
나를 왜 찾으십니까?
놓친 적이 없으니까요. 네가 하는 모든 게 다 사라질 거야. 곧 일어날 거야.
네가 누군지는 잊지 말해.
여기 네 앞에 얼마나 많은 기회들이 있는지 네가 몰라서 그러는 거야.
Created by So Hugh, starring Yoo Jang-yoon, Lee Min-ho, Min-ho Kim, Jin Ha, Soj Arai, In Ji-jong, Anna Sawai, In Chun-jung, and Sun Kun Kim. Devon, I know this is a show that when its return was announced, you were over the moon for. Mm-hmm. There's so much to cover in this, but we would need like a whole hour podcast just to do so. Give me your thoughts, but first, an overview of what happened this season.
I'm going to do my best to do this quickly, and just to note, I'm skipping a ton of storylines because there's so much that happens here, but just the broad strokes here. In the 1940s, Sunja and her sons Noah and Masasu are mourning the loss of their father Isaac when they are forced to flee their home as World War II takes its toll on the city. Hansa finds them a safe place to stay at a rice farm, and he also reunites Sunja with her mother and rescues her brother-in-law Yosib from Nagasaki in the wake of the atomic bomb. Sunja and her family return home to rebuild when the war ends. Then, in that storyline, we flash forward 6 years later, where Noah is preparing to take the entrance exam for university, something he's chosen to do without Hansa's help. He is admitted, but Sunja is forced to delay her dream of opening a restaurant in order to pay Noah's tuition. Then, we flash forward another year. Masasu gets in trouble for cheating at a local pachinko and ends up working there, bumping into a young Mamoru Yoshi along the way. Meanwhile, Noah is seemingly thriving in school under Hansa's watch, but his girlfriend crashes one of their dinners and immediately recognizes that Hansa is Noah's father. So when she tells him this truth, he flies into a range and after a short visit with his mother, runs away to assume a new name and take up a job at, where else? A pachinko parlor. And that's where we end that storyline at the end of season 2. But of course, there's a whole other half of the show happening in the 1980s, so let's cover that one quickly. Solomon seeks revenge against finance mogul Abe-san, and with the help of Mamoru Yoshi and his former boss Tom, sets Abe-san up for a massive financial failure at his own game. Sunja tries to warn Solomon not to do something he could regret, but he goes through with it, betraying his short-lived girlfriend Naomi along the way, and discovers that Abe-san took his own life in the wake of his public failure. Meanwhile, Sunja befriends Kato, an elderly man she meets at the grocery store, only for Masasu to hire a private detective to uncover dark secrets from his time in World War II. In light of this information, Sunja says goodbye to Kato. So again, a lot happening. I had to leave out so much. I mean, everything with Kyungi and Mr. Kim. I mean, come on. Like, there was so much happening in the season. It was such an enjoyable season. And just that recap, I'm like, I've got to rewatch this show.
I think the first thing from this season that I will say is I always wondered why the series was called Pachinko.
Mm-hmm.
Now we know why it's called Pachinko, right? At least for me, it wasn't apparent in the first season. But comparing what the first season was, did it live to expectations? Did you enjoy it? And how does it actually compare to season 1, like tonally, artistically?
Well, first of all, I loved it. I really enjoyed this season. And I would say that it maintains the tone and the feel of season 1, that multi-generational family vibe, that just it lends a weight to the show and the things that are happening, because you know that the ripple effects are going to be coming down the line. I feel like you still feel that very much so, and it just feels like you're watching a history of this ordinary person, but also such an incredible person in Sunja and her descendants and everything that they go through. This season, I appreciated the more focused nature. It's still vast. I mean, we still got those time jumps, but I'd say it's less so than in the first season. The first season, you're covering so much of Sunja's early life and kind of how she gets started, that here you get to spend more time in each period with these characters and really understand where they are at these particular moments in their lives. So it feels a little less, I wouldn't say the first season felt rushed, but this season just feels like it dwells a little bit more, which I appreciate. And there's a cohesiveness to the story that's so impressive given its breadth, the number of characters involved, and the fact that we're following multiple storylines. Throughout all of that, you can tell the care that's being put into the writing and the structure of the show. I mean, trying to structure a series like this with the storylines and paralleling the different things that are happening and just telling it in a way that a viewer can even follow. So impressive. And yeah, this season was really well done, and I feel like it lives right up to what they were doing with the first season as well.
I think how important this story is, also the adaptation being done this well, just lends to this story being able to get out to more people. I know, based on the structure of this story, I would have struggled with the book. And I did struggle with the book because I did try to read the whole thing and I just got completely lost. and so there's good reason for this adaptation, whereas, normally there's an argument against a book adaptation. Now, speaking of timelines and storylines, were there any particular moments or arcs to this story that stuck out to you?
There were a few that I really wanted to shout out. Of course, we have to start with Sunja. She's the matriarch. She's the main character of the show, and she's just such an incredible person. I think the thing I appreciated most about this season is just the incredible range of her life, all the things that she's been through, and seeing her resilience through all of it. I think that's just the thing about her that makes her such an impressive character to me. She goes through this constant cycle of building and then seeing it all destroyed and starting over again. We see her do that when she comes to Japan. We see her at the beginning of season 2 actually in a pretty good place in terms of her cart and, kind of making some money for her family. And then she has to turn to some more desperate means. And then again, the war comes through and devastates her home again. And then once again, she builds up to a place where she can send her son off to school and she's getting ready to start a business. And again, unexpected circumstances come out of the way and throw her plans off. So she's just this character who goes through this cycle so many times and comes out stronger every time and is able to build this family in such a beautiful way. It's impressive to see how far she comes by the later timeline when we catch up with her in the 1980s and seeing how well she's doing. But that struggle does carry on. And I think really where we see that struggle carry on the most in that later storyline is with Solomon, who's obviously going through some very different struggles. I think I talked about at the beginning of the season how the things that he goes through are totally different from what his grandmother experienced when she was young. And I think the fact that he still struggles, that's just the human predicament, right? But the kinds of troubles that he's having, the stakes, I think, really speak to how far this family has come. The question for Solomon this season is how far he's willing to go. He's benefited from all the sacrifice on his family's part, but he wants to make his own mark, right? And he wants to do something impressive. And his energy kind of gets directed in a way this season, I think, that is darker and maybe not the most positive. But what really interested me was at the beginning of the season, I was drawing parallels between Sunja's storyline and Solomon's and how they were continuing to struggle. But really, by the end of the season, Solomon ends up in a very similar place to Noah, who's the final character that I really wanted to highlight his storyline. Noah was such a mystery throughout the first season. He's this missing son who gets referenced very little in the 1980s storyline. They don't talk about Noah because, I mean, we can only imagine that something tragic has happened there. But here, this season, we get to spend so much time with him and really get a feel for who he is and really sympathize with him as, I would say, one of the main characters of this season, someone that you know that the turn is coming, but you don't want it. You want to see him win. And that's just that tension throughout the season. I feel like they did a really good job of holding that. So he suffers a devastating blow at the end of the season. He's lost his identity in a major way, not only in terms of who his father is, but also his cultural identity. At the end of the season, we see him take on a Japanese name and forsake his Korean heritage, which is another theme throughout the show that pops up quite a bit, is this Korean family in Japan dealing with discrimination and how they can be who they are in the face of that, which very interesting to see through the eyes of both Solomon and Noah. We don't know what the future holds for Noah, but I think we know it's not good, just based on the fact that he's not present later on. And again, it's just one of those, it feels like a family secret that just gets shut away sometime in those 40 years, and they just can't go to that place. So, but we're going to go there, right? We're going to have to see where his storyline goes in the future. Sunja's speech at the end of the season, I feel like, is really starting to get at what the show's about. If you're trying to sum it up, Sunja's talking to Mizasu, and she's talking about the people that they've lost and who lives. And she talks about people who, we all go through things in life. We all experience hardships, and we all struggle in our own ways, and everyone's pain is different. But she talks about people who lose their shadow and how that becomes the determining factor in who carries on. You got to hold on to your shadow, and somehow that's tied to your identity and your ability to survive. She doesn't go super deep on it. I hope that they explore that theme more throughout the next season if there is one. But I think that ties back to what you were talking about with the title of the show too. Pachinko, it's this family's business. It's how they make their income, but it's this game of chance, right? And that's what life is in a lot of ways, right? It comes down to, you never know what's going to happen to you. You don't know if you're going to succeed or if your city's going to be bombed and you're going to have to start over. And the fact that some people are able to hold on to their shadows and carry on, and the way different people react to that pain, I just feel like that's the closest I've gotten to a cohesive kind of takeaway from the show. And I find it very inspiring while I'm also processing it myself. But that concept of holding on to your shadow, I find that very powerful and something I want to explore more as the show carries on, hopefully.
Yeah, I think this is one of the best originals that Apple have put out. You questioned whether or not there'd be a third season. Mm-hmm. I don't think there's any doubts. So Hugh has done a fantastic job here. I'm not sure how many seasons there would be. I'm guessing like 3 or 4 to cover the breadth of the story. But when it comes to a proposed season 3, besides Noah's fate and Solomon's future, is there anything else you're looking forward to in a third season? Should it come? And I don't think there's really any doubt that it will.
Well, someone I haven't mentioned too much is Hansa. He kind of plays a little bit more of a background role in this season. He pops in, kind of the Deus Ex Machina kind of thing. He saves the day a couple times, and his relationship with Sunja is very interesting because her husband has passed away, so there's not that kind of tension anymore, so they can try to parent Noah together while also keeping the secret about his parentage. So that's really interesting. But we get a glimpse of his personal life this season, including a run-in with the Yoshi family, and I think that that's going to be something that is important to the future of his storyline. We don't know why he's not present in the 1980s storyline, but Soo Hugh did say in an interview that if there is a third season, that is one of the storylines that they're going to get into and explain, is why he's not present 40 years later. So we don't know exactly what happens to him, but that's one that I really want to see and get more of a glimpse into his life. Then there's Masasu, who, he's Solomon's father. I feel like he's kind of been a secondary character throughout these first two seasons. And we get a little bit more progression for him towards the end of season 2, where he starts to get into the business that we know he's going to end up in. And we see him struggle and try to figure out his future. But the other thing we really see is another run-in with the Yoshi family. There's been hints that these two families are somehow tied together, and we don't know how. But I feel like Masasu is going to kind of come to the forefront as we see him become that pachinko mogul over time, and hopefully see how that relationship between those families ties out. So those are the two characters I'm most interested in beyond Noah and Solomon. And then finally, the watch. We've got to track the watch because it goes away, it comes back, it goes away, it comes back, it gets sold, and somehow it keeps popping up. So we see Noah sell it at the end of season 2, but we also know that 40 years later, Sunja has it and gives it to Solomon. So again, we've lost it, but it's got to come back somehow. So I'm interested to see that. And I feel like that's just a really interesting other element to the show. Again, it's this theme, I feel like, of the things that you lose, how sometimes they come back to you and stick with you, even if you don't necessarily want them to. And so I'm interested to see what happens with the watch. Maybe that's a silly detail, but to me, I find it very interesting.
No, I don't think it's just things, it's people, right? It's relationships. So yeah, no, fantastic. Of course, an incredible show that neither of us can get enough of. Hopefully we'll get renewal news soon, but in the meantime, you can check out 2 epic seasons to enjoy again and again of Pachinko across all of your screens, now streaming on Apple TV+. Now, some TV app highlights and some up next picks before we bid adieu. An otherwise quiet week for Apple TV highlights this week, but it just so happens that Transformers 1, which I raved about on last week's show, having watched it in 3D in the Dolby Cinema, is now available in the TV app. I haven't looked to see whether or not it's available in 3D on Apple Vision Pro. You'd hope it would be. If not, as you know, there are other ways of doing that AI real-time conversion. Other than that, 2 new seasons of much beloved shows. The new season of What We Do in the Shadows is currently showing on Hulu. And on Sunday, we have the return of one of my favourite kind of like dramas that's really down to earth, a beautiful show. Somebody Somewhere returns for its 3rd season on Max. I'll very quickly give my up next pick because it's very, very simple. Dodgers v Yankees starting Friday in the World Series. 2 of the biggest names, if not the biggest names, in Major League Baseball. And of course, as we mentioned earlier, Apple will be there to capture it all. But for now, you can watch the first 2 games on Friday and Saturday, followed by more games in the series on Monday and Tuesday, live on Fox or internationally on MLB.tv. I'm excited for this. I think it's the first time both have met since the early 1980s, I think 1981. So, yeah, wow. One for the sports fans and maybe one for those that have never checked out Major League Baseball. Before it was quite slow. Some changes were made this year to speed up the games. So I think it's going to be more accessible, and really, what a better advert for the game than the Yankees versus the Dodgers.
Well, I'll say we don't watch a lot of sports in my house, but this game will definitely be on my TV this Friday. My wife and I are actually going out to a show, and her grandparents are going to be watching Noah, and her grandfather had one stipulation for watching Noah, and that was that we made sure we had some way to watch the baseball for him while he was over. So we made sure that was possible, and they'll be watching the game while we go to a show, and we'll catch up afterwards and find out who won. Speaking of shows, my up next pick for this week is a concert film. You know, I love some concert films, and this one's coming to Netflix on Tuesday. It's Olivia Rodrigo's Guts World Tour. I'm a big fan of her music. You know, of course, you see clips on social media of these tours and some of the funny things that happen and some of the memes that pop up. And So it's cool that we live in an age where production companies are hired to come into these big concerts and record them and give people at home who don't have any opportunity to go to the shows an opportunity to experience it. So I believe her tour is actually wrapping up this week. So this is kind of the end cap on it, is the home version for people to enjoy. And I'm excited to check that out Tuesday on Netflix.
Very, very cool, Devon. Before we end the show, of course, we always want to say this, and we mean it from the bottom of our hearts. Thank you so much for listening every week to us ramble about Apple TV. Tim Stringer, a weekly listener, messaged earlier this week and said, thank you for this weekly dose of magic. And I just want to say thank you all the way back for listening. And that really made my week. So thank you very much, Tim.
Yes, thank you, Tim. That was very kind. Thank you to everyone for listening and for everyone who writes in and sends in their feedback. Of course, we'd love to hear from you. So you can contact us on social media via the links in the show notes, or you can send us an iMessage or an email to magic@macstories.net. We'll be back next week with a premiere of You Would Do It Too and a discussion of Apple TV Plus at 5. So until then, stay safe, watch some Apple TV, play some Apple Arcade, and have a great week.